Halo Infinite's campaign is a brand new and fresh step for the series. There's the addition of the wide open world of Zeta Halo for you to explore, a whole bunch of content for you to do while out in the open world, and of course an entirely brand new story for you to experience. But all these, I don't need them. Objectively speaking, from a subjective standpoint, the most important addition by far is the grapple hook. Because let's be a little bit blunt, between you and me there is not a single video game series that would not be improved by the addition of a grapple hook. So today I'm here to ask and answer a question you probably never thought to yourself. Can you beat legendary Halo Infinite with only the grapple shot? The grapple shot, as well as all other equipment in the game we'll be utilizing, has a whole bunch of neat moves and upgrades. We'll get more in depth with every upgrade over the course of the video, but the main thing to note first is that since it is available the very second you start the campaign, the challenge begins from the get-go. But to real quick go over what's allowed and what isn't, all equipment is allowed except for one niche upgrade that can potentially deal damage. Vehicles are allowed as long as we don't deal damage with them, a la shooting or splattering. Marines are entirely allowed and can be customized and utilized whenever desired. Meleeing without grappling isn't allowed, and for our only real ranged attack, many of you said that grappling cores towards you and throwing them is a legal move, so that will be allowed. Also, as an editor's note, there is currently a fuck ton of bugs being discovered where you can skip almost all of the campaign. We're not going to be doing that for obvious reasons. This is just going to be a bog standard playthrough for every main mission. If you utilize all this to the fullest extent, the answer is obviously yes. But that feels a bit cheeky even for me, so we're just not going to do that this run. Anyways, to start up our campaign, recording issues, woohoo. So I had a whole bunch of problems IRL that affected both my PC and recording, mainly my CPU and internet, because as it turns out, a severe thunderstorm dealing millions in damage is not a good thing for my internet. Anyways, from the word go, we can utilize our main move for the early game, our basic grapple melee. When you grapple onto an enemy and ride the duration of the grapple towards them, you will melee them as soon as you get into range. This will be our main and only way to deal damage for the first few missions. And already as soon as here do things get problematic. Firstly, our grapple has an incredibly long cooldown and windup, meaning every enemy for now needs to be dealt with cautiously and one at a time. And one thing that is incredibly annoying is this prompt right here. So one thing that is incredibly common throughout all of the game is that you need to kill out a lot of enemies to hack a device. Whether it be something to continue the story, whether it be to open a door, an elevator, a grav lift, teleporter. You need to kill all the enemies nearby, which means we can't always just Tarzan our way through the map without a care. Anyways, for the first hackable machine, this elevator that I don't even need to hack logistically. There's absolutely no reason Master Chief couldn't just grapple up there, it's more than impossible. But anyways, I had to kill the brutes because I had to kill the brutes. And for this, I decided to just AFK by these fusion coils, or plasma coils, or whatever you want to call them. And if you're curious as to why I didn't just throw them, I didn't actually make this pull yet, so as far as I was concerned, it was an illegal move, so yeah. Once they did the forbidden move of shooting an explosive 2 feet in front of them and killing each other, I pushed forward to this room in which a good 90% of the mission actually takes place. In this room are a whole bunch of varying enemies and weapons. Grunts with grenades and pistols, brutes with snipers, brutes with jetpacks, brute with big guns, jackals with pretty tanky shields and support weaponry. You get the point. What this forced me to do was play this very carefully, making sure to kill only one target at a time and only advancing forward to the next enemy once the path was clear. Meaning logistically it was a really good idea to clear out one side, then abuse elevation and line of sight to clear out the middle eventually, and then the other side. This was extremely time consuming, as well pretty much everything in this challenge will be, and it took me roughly 30 minutes to even be able to hack the console to begin the next stage of the mission. Now we have to destroy these 2 power cores, or generators, or whatever sci-fi mumbo-jumbo bullshit you want to call them, as well as all the reinforcements that will come to defend. And this took a lot longer due to the fact that a lot of them are more specialized and they're more clumped up. So baiting one target in particular wasn't as easy, and well, it's just really time consuming, as I said earlier. Once I dealt with the first wave, I had to find out how to deal with the generator because we couldn't exactly shoot it, and after enough trial and error, I found that if I slingshot my body towards it, the momentum my body carries will do a very small amount of damage towards the core. And I really do mean a small amount. Backdooring these wasn't exactly going to be a possible venture. So now I have to deal with all the reinforcements from both the first and second wave, and again this took roughly about another 15 minutes. But once I killed off all the surrounding forces, I could recklessly charge myself into the generator until it explodes, and this big doofus goes, "Hey, pardon my manners, good sir, but if you don't mind me asking, what the actual fuck are you doing?" And honestly, I too would probably ask the same question if I saw an armored green man ping-ponging his way through every living being on my ship at inhuman speeds and velocity, but I digress. Ship's going boom now, we gotta escape. Despite this being a pretty video gamey moment where I just have to run to the Pelican, I fucked up way too many times and a lot more than I'd like to admit, and then we got to the end. We got a cinematic view of the titular Halo. We grapple ourselves into the Pelican, Halo Infinite. Well, before we actually explore the titular Infinite Halo or whatever, we have to locate the weapon. Fortunately, getting to her was pretty easy, with most of the enemies being fairly out of the way. I found her, and then it was exposition time. I gotta say, as somebody who hasn't played Halo 5 or has a single clue what actually happens in that game, I'm pretty fucking confused about anything relating to Cortana. But I like it when the lady in my head says funny things to me while I'm killing shit, so this'll do for now. After unlocking my Discord E-Kitten, it was time to proceed through the rest of the level, and fuck, some of these positions are not fun. Luckily, in between those, there are a lot of ways you can just kinda parkour through everything, but goddamn are the Banished not fond of my rope bullshittery. Especially this position right here that was already pretty tough to break, but do you know what made it even tougher? This goddamn checkpoint. I know if you die at a checkpoint enough, the game is actually courteous enough to send you back to the last checkpoint before that one, but I don't think I was in enough danger to actually get that to happen, so this just added a completely unneeded layer of complexity to an already daunting task. After about 20 minutes, I finally managed to kill off this position, and fortunately immediately afterwards I get to Hackett Bridge, in which my effort is rewarded with another fucking position to break. Now fortunately the checkpoints here actually worked and didn't put me in the belly of the beast for no goddamn reason, so this only took about 7 minutes, and afterwards we keep running and we find a Spartan who's taking a big nap. We steal her shield upgrade, which is cool because that's health, and I kinda like health. There's not a situation in this run I wouldn't want more health. And afterwards is a pretty easy position to clear with a small amount of jackals and grunts. Then we got our power seeds to the crucibles, and then it was time for the first boss, Tremonius. I did not have a fun time with Tremonius. In fact, despite being the first boss and debatably a really easy one, I'd argue this was one of the most difficult ones in the entire game given my circumstance. Firstly, he spawns with 2 jackals, which aren't usually godlike enemies by any means, but for the strategy we need to employ to beat the boss, you're going to see why keeping them alive is really problematic. So to skip over literally 40 minutes of attempts to find out the best way to deal with the jackals and not die, because keep in mind you can't just kill them on their own, there's a big fucking brute chasing you, I found that the best way was to run in a loop, look into Tremonius' sweet tender eyes, and then run in the opposite direction to deal with the 2 jackals who are usually just getting there. You take them out, and then it's time to employ our main strategy for any big enemy in this entire game, ring around a Rosie. Basically, if the guy looks at me funny for half a nanosecond, I fucking die. And that's not good because that means I'm dead. And bosses usually have very inconsistent checkpoints or literally no checkpoints, this time being the latter. Hence why it took me so long to find a way to consistently kill off the first 2 jackals, because any death means you go straight back to the beginning of the fight. Anyways, back to the actual boss. Most of his attacks are AoE, which isn't good because that makes us have to play insanely passive. Because if you're not at full health, or even close to full health, you're a lot closer to getting one shot, which is a big fucking problem when dying sends you back to the beginning. And normally this wouldn't be too much of an issue. Just run around, play passive, wait until you're full health and engage. The problem is, he recharges his shield at a scarily similar rate to your own. There might be a solid second of a delay before his shield recharges compared to your own, but you get the point. You need to play extremely aggressive against a boss who can one-shot you, and failure sends you back to the beginning. After about an hour, I finally managed to perfect this strategy, and trust me when I say it was actually a good thing this happened so early, because you're going to see extremely similar strategies throughout the entire run extremely frequently. It's like throwing a child straight into a wind turbine. Yeah, sure, in 98% of scenarios it'll lead to a horrific, avoidable, and saddening death, but goddammit, they will learn to eat their carrots if they get out unscathed. I managed to get the God run and I could finally go to the surface, in which I was met with a fortified Covenant position. Are you starting to see a theme here? Anyways, luckily this one wasn't too awful with how much cover there was, and now we could start exploring Zeta Halo. And here's where we have to discuss Spartan Cores. Spartan Cores are something you're going to find a whole lot during your Master Chief Fun Time adventures, and you need them to upgrade your equipment and shields. They're hidden throughout the map at set locations, although hidden is kind of a rough term. Anyways, after finding a few, of course with this challenge being in place, I decided to upgrade my grapple first for obvious reasons. Now I'm not saying this because I'm biased by any means, but I actually think overall the grapple has the best upgrades out of any equipment in the entire game. Don't get me wrong, there are some absolutely killer upgrades, but I would be lying if I said all of them were impactful by any means. Meanwhile, every grapple upgrade is incredible in its own right and synergizes well with every other upgrade. To condense a few hours of gameplay down, doing all this I got the following upgrades for my grapple. Voltaic, which temporarily stuns grappled enemies, Quick Shot, which reduces the grapple shot cooldown by an astounding 40%, and First Strike, which allows you to do this anime-ass move while holding the melee button while grappling. Quick Shot should be pretty self-explanatory. In a campaign where this is my only way to deal damage, of course having a big cooldown reduction is what we need the most. Voltaic, on the other hand, is extremely good because it makes grappling onto one enemy a lot less risky, barring some late game enemies, and even those are still affected. And this upgrade is already incredibly good, but it's First Strike and the upgrade that comes after that makes this extremely lethal. First Strike already gets rid of one of the biggest problems in this challenge, the wind-up time between you and the enemy you're grappling. Doing this animation quickly accelerates your approach and makes that a non-issue unless you're already in an incredibly shitty situation. And when we get Reachfall, well, the grapple just gets fucking insane. I won't have it yet, but I'll go ahead and cover it here, but First Strike has an incredibly small AoE effect when you grapple. Reachfall increases the damage of this AoE, the radius of it, and by far most importantly, any nearby enemies will be stunned similarly to Voltaic. This is insanely good. And again, I'd like to make the claim that this is by far the best equipment upgrades in the entire game, just because of how consistently fantastic they all are, as well as how well they synergize with each other. Anyways, after getting all the way up to First Strike, it was time to infiltrate the tower. And with a few Marines just hanging out all over the place and our newfound upgrades, the only threat here were the Jackal snipers, which fortunately in this game weren't as lethal as you'd hope. It's kind of ironic considering the difficulty for this is literally I hope you like Jackal snipers, but since they take a few seconds to aim up their shot and you know where they are, it's pretty easy to just get a stealth kill on them and move on with your day. Anyways, after killing off all the forces and activating the grav lift, you can move on to the tower. There is a small segment here with some relatively easy enemies, as well as a Spartan Core, and then it was time to defeat the next boss, Chaklock. Now when I announced that I was doing this run, a lot of people were saying, "Davey, this boss fucking sucks." And to say that didn't scare me would be a lie. So I put all these coils in this one position ready to Donkey Kong the actual fuck out of Chaklock. And although that burst damage was cool on paper, it actually led to my own death more often than not, so I ended up just actually first striking him to death with a surprising amount of ease. Even the threat sensor we literally just unlocked and I could have utilized throughout this entire fight wasn't really needed. And after his death we rescued some Spartan I honestly don't really know or care about, and then we unlock a new area of Zeta Halo to explore, which means it's time to find more Spartan cores. Although outside of more grapple and shield upgrades, there is actually two things that heavily benefit us later on in the campaign. Firstly are the bounty targets. When you clear them and their roster of goons, you can steal their modified weapon, that you can withdraw at any friendly fob absolutely free. Also, I know I haven't mentioned it yet, but fobs are just forward operating bases that you can get vehicles from, make weapons as I just said, and can fast travel to, so overall they're incredibly convenient. Anyways, these weapons don't really mean a whole lot to us with two big exceptions. Firstly is the energy sword, and although it took me fucking forever to find out how to kill this guy, it was well worth it. The energy sword is the only weapon in the entire game that actually attacks when you finish your grapple animation. Not even the gravity hammer does as far as I'm aware, and the damage it deals is extremely good. And against tougher enemies it's actually a pretty interesting dynamic. Yeah, this is a free sword that does a lot of damage, but how close are you to a fob to allocate more energy to your sword in a bad scenario? Can you even get to a fob in your current mission? Are there any enemies nearby that you can steal their ammo from? And obviously, are you willing to put yourself in more danger with a grapple duration if it means dealing more damage to your enemy? It's an interesting dynamic and one that I was actually glad to have at times, as it really spiced up my second-by-second decision making. The second one is really any power weapon, which although we can't use, Marines can, and holy fuck do they use them. To directly correlate this with the next point, there is this big progression system with all these cool unlockables, including vehicles, guns, soldiers that spawn at your fob with different weapons and tactics. But sadly, as soon as you have really any power weapon and 5 Marines of any variety, it's just GG. You get the Razorback extremely early on in the progression track, and yeah, sure, on paper I can have this cool kill squad with different strengths and weaknesses to cover each other, but have you considered having 5 skewers? I say this as no meme, as someone who has beat the original Halo trilogy with essentially only Marines. This is by far the best Marine AI in the entire series, and honestly they're probably a bit overtuned. Anyways, after unlocking Reachfall and my shield upgrades, it was time for the next main story mission, the excavation site. The mission objective is pretty simple for now. Kill off all the Covenant around the big drill, take out the cooling pylons, comic antics ensue. I'm honestly not trying to belittle these missions, but there's not a whole lot I can provide on this formula for now. There will be more interesting missions soon enough, but this isn't really one of them. Anyways, once we deconstruct additional pylons, we'll go to turn off the drill, but uh-oh, monkey. And I'm not saying this as some sort of denial or weird flex, but this is a melee boss in an arena with a lot of verticality and quite a bit of indication on which attack he was going for, so I knew this boss wasn't going to be too hard. So instead I wanted to do some experimentation for future bosses. So today I'm here to ask and answer a question that I'm sure you never thought to yourself. Can Marines 4v1 Bassus? The answer? Well, getting them up there took way too many tries, and I admittedly spent way more time than reasonable trying to get them up there, but once they were, the answer is a resounding fuck no. Granted, that's entirely because they didn't have their cool boy weapons, because I didn't unlock the skewer until after this boss, but god damn it, I'd be lying if I said they didn't help. And with their sacrifice, I was more than able to defeat the boss, and then I spent like 50 minutes fighting Iknovus because god damn it, I really wanted to skewer. Then I tested out my aptly named Revolution Death Squad. They're a little bit fucking strong. Anyways, I tried to take my kill team into the conservatory, but sadly they despawned out of existence once I started the mission, and damn, that wasn't a fun time for either of us. Do you want to know why this conservatory is hard? It's not because of the enemies, you can actually get immensely far just Tarzaning past everything, but hitboxes. This is a problem you will see throughout the entire challenge, but only specifically in indoor missions. And let me tell you, missing out on literal dozens of minutes of progress because Master Chief grappled into Satan's asshole rather than to Jackal 2 feet away from you isn't a fun time. Granted, there's also the opposite problem where I get sent into the fucking stratosphere, but that's less so annoying and more so incredibly amusing. Even if it leads to my death, just look at it. It's crisp, I love it. On the complete contrary of love, hate. Here's the first real instance of this bug fucking me over. There are 2 incredibly strong brutes here with more than enough potential to one-shot me if I'm not careful, but luckily there is a strategy I found where I run in circles around this pile of boxes until I inevitably whittled them down. And after 15 minutes of finding out the strategy and finally killing off the first brute, it was time for the second one. Whoopsie doopsie, I guess I didn't need the fucking ground anyways. Guess I have to do it all over again. Anyways, fortunately, and I'm using fortunately very fucking lightly here, this time we only had this happen once. But trust me, in prolonged fights against individual monsters with no save points, fuck me, this is not an uncommon occurrence and one that I goddamn despised by the end of the game. To break the fourth wall real quick, I'm actually writing the script out now, or I guess since I'm voicing it over I wrote the script back then, exclusively because I lost literally an hour and a half of progress across multiple reloads on one encounter on the last mission of the game. If it isn't evident by my tone of voice, I'm a little bit upset. Anyways, after this complete abomination, we finally got into the cool area out here, the Harbinger animated all over the place, then I got a new mission, the Spire. But before getting into the Spire, we have our first fight against Hunters. And let me tell you something, Hunters in this game are fucking scary. Honestly, Hunters are my favorite design in all of Halo. I fucking love them and they actually knocked it out of the park in this game. They sound badass and I love them. But we're not actually going to get in depth with them right now because yeah. Marines, am I right? Anyways, once we get into the Spire, we walk around a little bit, and then it's time to fight Adjutant Resolution. Now this is what most people would consider the easiest boss in the campaign. It's pretty clear how you kill him, and since over time you're getting rid of more and more of his weapons, he's an incredibly easy fight. But there's a caveat to that. An incredibly easy fight in most playthroughs. Because guess what, boyo? You can't grapple onto him. You know what? Okay, fair enough. I don't expect every boss to be able to be grappled onto, but we do have our AoE damage move, so all we have to do is find a way to damage him with our AoE, and... oh yeah, did I mention he has a fucking practically unavoidable insta-kill melee move? Now, I do not like getting into the realm of theoreticals in my challenge runs. I usually like to just say yes or no, but let me be blunt. Can you kill this boss with only the grapple shot? Yes. I went out of my way and spent 2 hours to get a bunch of equipment upgrades, which I'll get into in just a moment, and I believe with the best possible usage of those upgrades, this boss is actually defeatable. The problem is, since this boss doesn't have any checkpoints, you need a god run. And since the melee attack is present throughout every phase of the fight, and you can't target the individual weapons due to the fact you're obviously AoEing, and aiming a literal millimeter off your target is more than enough to send you all the way back to the very beginning. Yeah, it's not easy. You know, honestly, all this would still be doable, but here's the big problem. These 2 fucking grenade launchers. On easy, normal, or possibly even heroic, these aren't all that big of a problem. On legendary, they can one-shot you even behind cover. And that's really the big deal breaker, because I found areas in the room in which I could abuse structures to get hits off, but that doesn't really help if staying behind those structures just leads to a different death. And ultimately, with the lack of a chapter select available at the moment, I cannot say that I could do this. So for the time being, no, I couldn't beat this. But when they add in the chapter feature, I'm actually more than happy to revisit this and prove myself again. Using the forbidden grapple technique of shoot gun, I was able to beat the boss and I figure I'll go more in depth with the upgrades I got. I got the Swift Shelter, Rampart, and Blockade upgrades, which increases our wall strength by 105%, reduces the cooldown by 20%, and significantly increases the wall size. And although I didn't get any thruster upgrades quite yet, That was because I was waiting to get a few Spartan cores due to how much I'll be utilizing it primarily only after I get the last upgrade. Fortunately, we're actually able to start getting these upgrades pretty easily once we start the next mission. Unfortunately, the reason that is because Echo 3-digit number did a fucky wucky and got shot down by some AA guns. And although he's a little bit upset at John for pretty valid reasons, he doesn't particularly care, and now it's time to take down the AA guns. Taking out the first one is a bit difficult, as in theory, you can just activate the grav lift and skedoodle on in. But that's immensely easier said than done, as there is a lot of banished forces around the grav lift who want to make sure that isn't a possibility. So you're better off killing quite a big portion of the surrounding fortification before that even becomes a reliable option. And even then it's not a guarantee, as I was immensely lucky and managed to do it after not too much time. And fortunately for us, despite Big Monkey over here overall not having a good time with my existence, he doesn't really spawn any enemies in, so we can just move straight towards the second one, which is more of the same. Except hunters. Again, fortunately they're not mandatory to kill, especially since we don't have any fobs nearby, but if you think you're just going to casually walk in and activate the grav lift without abusing your equipment, you're dead wrong. Once that was done, the third one was actually by far the easiest, as you don't even need to activate a fucking grav lift for whatever reason. And then Echo 3-digit number is, by the way rationally, doing anything fucking else other than staying in the Pelican, and uh-oh, Spartan killers are inbound on his position. I wonder if they live up to their name. Well, small spoiler for 4 seconds into the future, but yeah, they did. Their names are Tovarius and Hyperius. Hyperius is immensely harder than Tovarius, mostly because he actually spawns in a chopper which can completely fuck you despite how cool it looks, or rather because of how cool it looks. So you have to hijack it and drive it into a random direction for long enough to get your checkpoint, then go back to the fight and hope for another one. Even after that though, the rest of the fight isn't a cakewalk, requiring by far the least consistent and most lethal game of Ring Around a Rosie yet. Because instead of a solid box we can run around, or even a box that can be moved around, we have a dumbass Pelican, which has a lot of small gaps in which bullets can fly through it, and with Tovarius still being a threat in the background constantly firing barrages to suppress me, it's not a fun time. And please do remember that these weapons have more than enough capability of killing me within a second, and brutes can melee me pretty easily, so Hyperius was a complete bitch to deal with. Eventually though, I managed to perfect my dreaded grapple thruster shield grapple thruster combo, and I was able to defeat Hyperius, and you're about to see why I've only been mentioning him up until now. Tovarius, being the complete redditor that he is, can't stop scrolling through r/prequel memes and keeps going teehee x3 I have the high ground Spartan, to the point that as an active detriment it made his fight incredibly easy. Lure him into a high ground position, back off, punch him over and over and over and over again with absolutely no risk of being damaged, finish him off, GG. After he was dead, it was time to find Echo 3-digit number and experience a cutscene that felt a little bit too human for Master Chief's Funtime adventure and admittedly actually fucked me up a little bit. And guess what? Now we get to hijack Banshees. Now what's great about this, other than the obvious motion of flight, is that we can also combat multiple Banshees. Doing this little maneuver right here where we get out of the Banshee, grappling onto the enemy's Banshee while falling and getting them out of it is really fucking badass. And honestly, with this fight I was able to easily unlock a whole bunch of Spartan cores and fully upgraded my thrusters. I already kind of indirectly mentioned the second charge upgrade I got earlier, but at full upgrades it makes my thrusters significantly more powerful, boosting me further away and faster, and now it provides me active camo for a few seconds after using it, and at this point I have become anime. Enemy positions that used to give me an immense amount of trouble earlier are now actually dealt with ease. I can't overstate how well you can start synergizing all this equipment. After you finish grappling, thruster away. You'll become invisible and it gets you out of fire. If you're somehow still in danger, put down a drop wall, and then grapple away somewhere else, thruster to gain stealth, get a sneak attack off, thruster away. You get the point, it's really fun. I know I'm drastically overselling this here, but it felt like a shonen anime power boost. Except instead of turning from a literal god to an even more powerful god, it's like a fucking chubby middle schooler turning into a slightly less chubby high schooler. Anyways, on to the actual mission objective. We had to reconstruct 4 sequences to enter the command spire. And despite how tedious this was, the only one that could feasibly do anything against me at this point is the Spire with a Hunter Squad defending them, but too bad my Revolution Death Squad is back online and fucking one-shot them and the incoming Phantom without breaking a sweat. They did kind of photobomb this cutscene a little bit, but who cares, they killed some hunters for me, woohoo. Once all 4 McMuffins are up and running, we can now enter the Command Spire, which there's a bunch of entrenched positions, but you never seen that one coming. You've seen it before. Mandatory hacking sequence, I bonk them all away. There's no mandatory hacking sequence, I Tarzan away from everything with no sweat. But God forbid, eventually, it's our first mandatory hunter segment, and there's no Marines here. Now this did kind of concern me because a few people did express concern thinking that this would be impossible since grappling onto them is inconsistent at best, but fortunately they are very much defeatable, but extremely time consuming. Every hunter encounter is bound to be at least 20 minutes long, usually more so 25 to 35. This entire battle right here was more or less fucking with the hunter AI since we have to use our shockwave as our main form of damage, so that meant that the main strategy was going to be admittedly extremely passive. Granted, there's actually enough area in this room that if both hunters are on one side of the room, I can actually move into the other side all sneaky breaky like and snag a checkpoint, which definitely helped. Do you know what didn't help? Falling through the fucking map as soon as the last hunter was gonna die, resetting the 30 minutes of progress I spent on it. And oh, don't you worry, this is just a teaser. Trust me when I say this isn't going to be the first or last time you'll see me losing progress like this in hunter fights. We're going to hit literal hours in total soon enough. Anyways, going back to the last checkpoint and spending another 30 minutes of my life doing the same shit I was doing earlier, but with an optimized 5% rate of knowledge, I could finally move on to a gondola segment with a fuck ton of sentinels. Now, sentinels as a whole aren't going to be too much of a problem in this run, but right here, when they're over a massive gap that I can't possibly come back from, and they're spawning all over the place really far away, I had to hide like a little bitch while mommy drove me across the big scary tunnel. And occasionally I'd feel courageous and pop my head out for 1/10 of a nanosecond and I would die immediately. But eventually though, I hid enough that we got to the other side, then I tried to delete my EGF for not having matching Discord Nitro anime profile pictures, found a skull on accident, and then I made one fatal error, thinking I could be happy. Guess what? Out of all the bosses in the entire game to show up multiple times, guess who it fucking is? Whoa! Why? Well, rather unusually, they committed suicide via shooting themselves in the eyeball repeatedly with a skewer, or at least that's what the FBI told me. And then after this, I made another fatal mistake, thinking I could be happy. Now again, just like Adjunct Resolution, this is actually still possible. There's some jank-ass hitboxes you can abuse, but this is near impossibly fucking brutal. Again, if you can tank shots for a little bit, absolutely, you can do it. That is not really an option you have on Legendary without an immense amount of luck. And oh yeah, no checkpoints. So the death count is rising up to 5. Woohoo. Anyways, afterwards we can just Tarzan through most of the remaining segments, realize that Echo the Dolphin got kidnapped and now we gotta save him. This is actually where the story pretty much goes straight into the jaws of the beast, as most of the conflict we're going to be having after this is pretty much endgame. Anyways, remember that Spartan Killer segment I was complaining about earlier? Now imagine that, but Tovaris stopped warping to Star Wars and we're now both in an incredibly small room. This wasn't very fun, and I had to run around the entire map collecting enough explosive barrels to Donkey Kong at them, which fortunately did pretty well. And with our super thruster move, killing them off wasn't as brutal as initially anticipated with this. The next chieftain was also pretty easy due to the fact that he had a gravity hammer, which is surprisingly easy to abuse. Then my EGF tries to commit suicide, which isn't very poggers of her, and then we can progress to the House of Reckoning. Remember that speedrun I mentioned at the very beginning of this video? This is where you skip to if you do that strategy, so theoretically our death count could be down to 0, but that's kind of cheeky and something I didn't want to do, so yeah. Anyways, this segment was incredible, because it's evident with the Marines, vehicles, and Master Chief's dialogue that you're supposed to have this climactic battle towards one of the last missions of the game. But what if we didn't do that actually? And god, the music's just going in, it sounds so cool, and it's fucking just playing over me grappling away from everything, literally not touching a soul. It's beautiful, I love it. Anyways, once we're actually in the House of Reckoning, we go through 2 battlefield set pieces that are actually really cool and provided some very fun and interesting battles. And god, I was fucking pumped by this point in the campaign. Constantly finding my way through the Banished while getting taunted by Escharum the entire time. I was moving, and then he told me he was about to send over some of his best and brightest. And do you know what that means? I think we both know what that means. Hunters, but edgier. Edgy hunters. Now if you've played a Halo game, you know that hunters don't particularly like it when their brother dies. They'll typically get a lot more aggressive, charge a lot more, deal significantly more damage, and are usually a lot fucking scarier. Now imagine if they spawned like that, and they still get a pretty similar power boost after their brother dies. It wasn't fun. After about roughly 30 minutes I killed off the first hunter, and then while I was swinging around trying to get to the second one, I found this button, and then found another button right by it. And when a video game provides 2 buttons with no prompt, shit dude, you have to grapple around and see if you can find any more. There's gotta be a cool Easter egg or a skull or something. Now unfortunately, despite 20 minutes of Tarzaning around trying to find the third button, it didn't exist. It was hidden away at the very beginning of this room and I couldn't access it anymore. Now despite the crippling depression this gave me, after looking it up I realized it actually wasn't really all that much. Instead of a skull, or an Easter egg, or a dance party, or a fucking sandwich, you get an entire rocket hog. That I couldn't even use in this challenge. Woohoo. Anyways, after this, I actually found my greatest ally yet again. Boxes. But unlike how I usually abuse them, I didn't just run around them. This time I became one with boxes. Throughout the game, you can actually find hunters jumping up and down small cliffs to try and get a better angle to fire on you, but since this one can't shoot me here, he just jumps up and down these 2 boxes ad infinitum, which gives me plenty of opportunity to pop up, grapple punch them, and return to my hidey hole and eventually whittle them down. And after roughly 70 minutes, including my 20 wasted trying to find a non-existent skull, I was eventually able to beat both hunters, and then it was time for the next boss. Now at first I was terrified because this boss is very spooky. There's no music, he likes to stealth and disappear, and he has a very scary weapon combo of an energy sword and plasma grenades, turning this into a pseudo-horror game where I had to constantly keep my ears out at all times to try and hear when he uncloaked or when he was approaching me. Unfortunately though, despite how badass of a setup this was, it was kind of wasted on the fact that you don't even need to kill him. Your only objective is survive. Just survive. Which although gives me violent PTSD of the ending of Halo Reach, it was kind of a letdown and kind of left me feeling. Okay, so I'm not usually one to do editor's notes like this, but I did look this up trying to see if anybody had a similar thought process. Apparently you do have to defeat him, but the thing is he recloaks after the fight is over, meaning he might not actually be dead. So the overall sentiment I had in the cut audio where I think he's going to show up in the DLC is still there. It's just that you do actually have to deal damage to him, so yeah. Anyways, regardless, I was able to move forward and battle Escharum, which sadly was not very eventful. There's a position right here that you can abuse with a threat sensor to almost always have a good jump on him, with little to no pressure of death as long as you aren't greedy. And even if you make a mistake where you greedily go for an extra punch or die or whatever, there's also checkpoints frequently throughout the fight, so it's actually not all that much of an issue. The last phase with the gravity hammer is extremely fucking brutal though. He pulls an Adjutant Resolution and the battle completely changes where you have to play like a complete bitch to avoid getting one-shot, but it's still doable. Very much so in fact. And after this boss battle is the last mission of the campaign, the Silent Auditorium. Overall, pretty easy to start. At the very beginning there is an extremely well developed blockade we have to clear out, but it's nothing we haven't seen before and we can eventually whittle off forces one by one until we can eventually hack open the door. And guess what time it is? I won't lie, the second I saw this I just alt F4'd and logged off for the night. So I logged off and went, okay, tomorrow I spend an hour and move on with the rest of the campaign. An hour was a massive understatement because guess what happened? Remember how I said I was scripting this video out after spending an hour and a half failing because of haha, funny bug go burr? That was a lie. Yeah, I wrote out the script at that time after losing an hour and a half of progress, but you know what would be funny? What if we doubled that and made you lose 3 hours instead? Isn't it really fucking funny? Isn't falling through the map losing combined hours of progress funny? Do you like that creeping feeling of nihilism where you know even if you fucking fall through the map you have no other option than to restart entirely, in which even then it's not a guarantee you can actually finish off the fight? Do you enjoy the concept of wasting 40 hours of your life on an arbitrary challenge while you're falling through the fucking void? Isn't it funny that you also fucking failed that challenge way earlier, and this is now entirely arbitrary? Haha. Anyways, they died, and it was exposition time. Now, I won't lie, as somebody who's a Halo 1, 2, and 3 baby, I'm fucking confused. I don't know what's going on here. Apparently Cortana is Cyber Jesus and can just nuke planets for some reason. Also Australia? Goodbye Australia, I guess. And although I can confidently say at least half of the population there survived on the basis that they're Australian, I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking right now. So, guess what? It's final boss time. Now this final boss is something you've never seen before. Something incredibly terrifying. A brute chieftain. Now I'm lying, but seriously, I saw this arena and it looked vaguely similar to the platform you fought Tartarus on at the end of Halo 2. And I was really excited. I thought maybe there's a possibility of Atriox returning, and I was so fucking pumped. But no. It's just this floating bitch who has the personality trait of 343 finding different ways on how to define the word Harbinger, and making the voice actress say it very menacingly. So let me tell you how this fight went down. Excusing this bullshit ass checkpoint right here that I refuse to count, the Harbinger killed me twice. Do you know what killed me 4 times as much? This literal generic, non-special, non-unique, entirely normal brute chieftain that spawns as a part of a banished wave. Literally one brute chieftain is 4 times as powerful as the final boss. And that's because she has 3 moves. This instant transmission shit that is really only annoying rather than intimidating or threatening. This punch that really doesn't do all that much damage for a legendary difficulty final boss. And this weird damage orb thing which, well, it doesn't really achieve a whole lot really. Like I said, she only killed me twice. In retrospect, I think it's just kind of funny that by far the easiest boss in the entire campaign was the hardest by a near infinite margin. Anyways, for the fight I started blasting. And by I started blasting I mean this weird shit, and then the final boss was defeated. To the point I actually expected some weird Final Fantasy final boss phase where they ascended to an entirely new, all-powerful form. But no, she's just dead. Cool, I guess. Anyways, I killed her off. My ex-EGF did something, I'm sure. Echo 3-digit number realized his name was actually Fernando, gave me a big fuck-off hug which I'm honestly envious of. We fly into the sunset, Halo Infinite. I did not beat Halo Infinite on Legendary with only the grapple shot. There's a combined 5 enemies I killed with the Forbidden Art of Gun, but I do want to say right here, it is entirely doable. Keep in mind where the skip is located, and keep in mind where the 5 enemies we have to kill were. This is possible, and I want to say at the very least I proved that it could be done, even if you have to use cheeky methods by the end. As always, thank you to my Dumbo Head patrons who have the incredible financial strategy of giving me disposable income to watch videos that I upload for free. And I don't really got an outro for this one. I think the final moments of this recording kind of say it all.
What now, Chief?
What I said. We finished the fight.